You can fall in love with a voice, with a name, with the way someone types "good morning" at the same time every day. That's how it started for Linda Moreno. A voice in her headphones, a username glowing on her screen, and messages that slowly filled in the empty spaces of her days. In the spring of 2021, Linda was 50 years old and living alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Mesa, Arizona. Once, she'd made a decent living as a local tour guide, taking visitors through ghost towns, desert trails, and historic hotels around the state. She loved meeting new people. She loved talking. And she especially loved getting paid to do both. But when the pandemic hit in 2020, Arizona's tourism industry all but vanished. One month, she had 5 tours booked. The next, none. Within weeks, she was out of work, living off savings, and trying to adapt. Like many others, she signed up to drive for rideshare apps. It wasn't glamorous, but it helped. Until it didn't. Gas prices rose. Tips dried up. And then came the health scare. She tested positive for COVID and had to quarantine. After that, her energy changed. She drove less, stayed home more, and, slowly, she began spending most of her hours in front of a screen. That's how she found Mythic War, an online multiplayer fantasy game that had its own in-game kingdoms, chat rooms, and real-world forums. It was a way to escape, to belong, to be someone else for a while. And it was in one of those late-night forums where she first encountered the name Caleb W37. At first, it was just casual back and forth over game mechanics, equipment tips, and update rumors. But Caleb was different. He was quick with jokes, generous with compliments, and most of all, he listened. Not in a passive way, but in the kind of way that made Linda feel seen. He told her he was 38, studying pharmaceutical sciences at a university in Oregon. He said he worked part-time at a campus lab and moderated the online community to keep himself sane between classes. She told him about her work, her love of the desert, her cat named Whiskey, and her dream of visiting Glacier National Park one day. The chat never stopped. Within 3 months, they were messaging daily, sometimes video calling, sometimes falling asleep on the line. Caleb started sending her links to songs he said reminded him of her. He even recorded short voice notes of himself singing. Not perfectly, but sweetly enough to make her heart flutter. For the first time in years, Linda felt chosen. She told her sister about him in passing, mentioned him to a coworker once. But mostly she kept it to herself. She knew how it sounded, falling for someone 12 years younger, someone she'd never met in person. But it didn't feel reckless. It felt safe, familiar. Like their connection was carved out of something real. Caleb never asked for money, never made excuses. In fact, he often offered to send her things, books, headphones, a new webcam. But she always politely declined. What she wanted wasn't gifts. It was him. After nearly 2 years of this virtual closeness, they began to talk seriously about meeting. At first, Caleb suggested he would come to Arizona. He wanted to see where she lived. Try her cooking. Meet her family. She was thrilled. Started planning what to show him. Her favorite trailheads, the coffee shop she liked, the old mission church. But then came the change. In June 2022, Caleb said he couldn't make the trip. Money was tight. School was demanding. He sounded genuinely regretful. Said he hated disappointing her. And that's when Linda made a decision that changed everything. She told him she would come to him. He hesitated at first, said he didn't want her to sacrifice so much. But eventually he relented, told her he'd be there waiting at Portland International Airport, ready to start a new chapter together. From that moment on, Linda went all in. She began selling off her belongings piece by piece. First, it was the treadmill she never used. Then the slow cooker, the decorative mirror, the hand-woven rug she brought back from Santa Fe. She sold her car last, reluctantly, but it brought in the most cash. Altogether, she scraped together just over $5,000, enough, she hoped, for a one-way flight, a few months of shared expenses, and a chance to start fresh in Oregon. Her family noticed the changes, asked questions. Her younger brother warned her to be careful. Her niece said she should at least visit first before making any permanent move. But Linda waved off the concerns. She told them it wasn't impulsive, that she'd spent 2 years getting to know this man, that she was finally doing something for herself. By the end of July 2022, Linda had donated most of her furniture, packed her clothes into 2 large suitcases, and said goodbye to her cat, temporarily leaving him in her sister's care. She told her family she'd keep in touch every day, that she wasn't running away from them, she was running toward something better. On July 30th, her family drove her to the airport. She hugged them tightly, smiling through nervous tears. Her last message before boarding was simple. "He's real. This is happening. I feel like I'm about to begin my life again." And in a way, she was right. Life as she knew it would never be the same. She landed in Portland just after midnight. And sure enough, Caleb was there waiting, holding a handwritten sign that said, "Team," and smiling like a man who'd waited his whole life for this one moment. To Linda, it felt like everything had aligned. But what she didn't know then was that she had just walked into the last chapter of her own story. Not all beginnings are loud. Sometimes they arrive in whispers, in the scent of salt water, the hush of an unfamiliar hallway, the look in someone's eyes when they think you're finally theirs. When Linda stepped out of the airport that early morning, it was still dark. The air was thick with the coastal damp of the Pacific Northwest. Caleb loaded her bags into his car, a slightly beat-up gray Toyota Corolla, and offered her a travel mug of black coffee. She smiled, grateful, and took it with shaking hands. They drove for 2 hours, mostly in silence, heading west toward a small coastal town named Astoria, perched at the mouth of the Columbia River. Linda watched raindrops stream across the window and imagined what life here would look like. Seafood markets. Seagulls in the morning. Walks along the jetty with Caleb. A new routine, a new home, a new love. Caleb lived in a tiny second-floor unit in an old rental house a few blocks from the beach. The building looked weathered, with chipped paint and a rusted staircase, but the view of the ocean from the kitchen window was worth it. He told her it was temporary, just something he kept while finishing his clinical rotations in nearby Warrenton. The place was sparse. A single mattress on the floor, a second-hand desk, a small table with 2 chairs, and 1 faded couch. No decor. No warmth. But Linda didn't mind. She was used to starting from scratch. In her mind, this was just the seed. They'd build something better, together. The first few days passed quietly. Caleb would head out to campus in the morning, leaving Linda alone with a house key, a list of nearby cafes, and access to his Wi-Fi. She used the time to unpack, walk the beach, take selfies in front of the waves, and call her sister every evening to say she was safe. "He's quiet," she told her niece on one call. "But gentle, thoughtful. I think he's just shy in person. It's still early, but it feels right." She shared pictures of herself smiling on the boardwalk, of the fog rolling in over the dunes, of the handwritten note Caleb had left her. "Mi casa es tu casa. Welcome home." Her family, though still cautious, started to relax. As long as she was communicating daily, they figured it was fine. Maybe she really had found someone. Maybe this was the beginning she deserved. But the cracks, like hairline fractures in glass, had already begun to show. The first came on the 4th day, when Linda mentioned meeting Caleb's friends or seeing his school. He dismissed it casually, saying he didn't really socialize outside of online gaming and that the university had strict COVID protocols. He didn't want to risk exposing her. "It's just us for now," he told her. "Let's enjoy it." The next came when she asked if she could take a walk into town while he was away. He hesitated, said the lease only allowed 1 person to live there, and the landlord was strict. If anyone saw her coming or going, it might raise questions. She agreed, reluctantly, but found it odd. By the 2nd week, Caleb gave her a local SIM card and helped her set up a second phone. The new number would be useful for ordering food, he said, or in case she needed to reach him locally. But he also asked her to limit her online posts, just until things felt more stable. He said he didn't want attention. Linda agreed. She wanted to be respectful. But her sister noticed that her posts slowed down, that her calls became shorter, more rushed, that her usual spark dimmed. "I'm okay," she said on a call. "Just tired. Adjusting to the weather. He's working a lot." Behind the scenes, however, Linda was beginning to feel isolated. She had no car, no job, no official address, no friends nearby. And when Caleb was home, he was often distracted, buried in his laptop, playing games, or watching obscure medical tutorials online. She tried to engage him, cooked him meals, cleaned the apartment, bought candles to make the place feel more like home. But he remained distant, drifting in and out of conversation like a man watching a screen behind her eyes. By mid-October, Linda sent a quiet text to her niece. "Do you ever wonder if you made a mistake, but it's too late to undo it?" Her niece replied right away. But Linda never followed up. What her family didn't know was that Linda had called the airline earlier that week, asking about changing her return ticket. The agent told her it was non-refundable and the change fee would be steep. Linda thanked them, hung up, and never mentioned it to anyone. At the same time, Caleb began giving her weekly allowances, $20 here, $25 there, for basic expenses. She felt humiliated but grateful. She told herself it was temporary, that once he graduated, things would change. She didn't know she was being trapped. Late one night, a neighbor reported hearing muffled shouting through the apartment wall. The next morning, Linda had a small bruise on her upper arm. When her sister asked on a video call, Linda blamed it on bumping into a doorknob. "You know how clumsy I am," she laughed. But the laugh didn't reach her eyes. Still, no one imagined the worst. Because no one ever thinks that could happen to someone they love. Not until the silence begins. And the silence began on November 7th, 2022. That morning, Linda sent a cheerful text to her niece. "He made pancakes today. Maybe I'm growing on him." It was the last message anyone would ever receive from her. Hours passed. Then an entire day. Her phone stopped ringing. Her social media went dark. No updates. No check-ins. No replies. At first, her family assumed she was busy. Maybe they were traveling. Maybe she lost signal. But by midnight, fear set in. Calls went unanswered. Messages unread. Something was wrong. They just didn't know how wrong. When someone you love goes quiet, your mind fills in the silence. At first, it whispers excuses. Then it starts to scream. November 7th, 2022, began like any other. Linda had texted her niece that morning. It was short but sweet. Something about pancakes and ocean air. There were no red flags in her words. No cries for help. But that was the last anyone heard from her. By noon, her phone no longer rang. By 6 p.m., her social media went dark. And by nightfall, the silence was unbearable. Her niece, Marissa, was the first to panic. She'd grown up idolizing Linda, her laughter, her kindness, her defiant independence. They had a bond that wasn't just aunt and niece, it was something more like sisters. When Linda didn't reply to her texts by evening, Marissa called. No answer. She tried again. And again. Midnight came. Then 2 a.m. By the next morning, the whole family was on edge. They tried rationalizing it. Maybe Linda had dropped her phone. Maybe the battery died. Maybe she was traveling. But none of that fit her patterns. Linda was a habitual communicator. She checked in even when nothing was happening. A woman who sent good night texts religiously didn't just vanish. By November 8th, the worry turned into action. Marissa started digging. She pulled up old messages, photos, usernames, anything that could lead her to Caleb Warren. She found his online gaming profile through archived Discord chats and traced it to a public Facebook page that hadn't been updated in a few weeks. His profile photo was generic, a close-cropped headshot in grayscale, but his name matched. And there, buried in his friends list, was a tagged photo of him and Linda from July 30th, the day she landed in Oregon. He was real. But so was her fear. Without hesitating, Marissa messaged Caleb directly. "Hey, this is Linda's niece. She's been out of contact since yesterday. Do you know where she is?" He replied 45 minutes later. "She left." The response was curt, emotionless. He claimed Linda had broken things off with him. That she'd bought a bus ticket back to Portland and was flying home to Arizona. He said she needed space and had asked him not to follow her. Maybe her phone had died, he added. Or maybe she just needed time. Then he sent a screenshot. A chat log dated November 7th, the last day anyone heard from her. In it, Linda's side of the conversation read, "Thanks for everything. Heading to the capital now. Wish you the best." Caleb's message underneath said, "Safe travels. Watch your bag, lots of theft on that route." To a casual reader, it sounded plausible, polite, distant. But Marissa's gut screamed something else. That message wasn't Linda. It didn't sound like her. Linda didn't talk like that. She didn't say, "Thanks for everything," to the man she gave up her entire life to be with. She would have called, left a voice message, told someone she was on the way. She wouldn't leave like that, Marissa told her parents. Not without telling me. Not without saying goodbye. Her instincts sharpened. She kept questioning Caleb. At first, he engaged. But when she asked for bus or flight details, he became evasive. "I don't keep her schedule," he wrote. "You should probably respect her decision to leave. Stop messaging me. You're stressing me out." Then came the final message. "I did nothing wrong. I don't owe you anything." And with that, he blocked her. That same night, Marissa posted a missing persons alert on Facebook. She included photos of Linda, a timeline of her disappearance, and the last known messages from Caleb. She asked others to share the post, and within hours, it went viral. People were shocked. A 50-year-old woman uprooting her life to meet a man she'd never seen in person, and now missing? It struck a nerve. Comments flooded in. Women shared similar stories. Families offered to help. Locals in Oregon began checking forums and beach towns, reposting her picture in online groups. The hashtag Find Linda Moreno began to spread across platforms. The pressure grew so quickly that Astoria PD and the Clatsop County Sheriff's Department had no choice but to open an official inquiry. With the Mexican consulate now involved, and growing attention from national media, police issued a formal summons for Caleb Warren to appear for questioning. He showed up, but not as expected. He was calm, cold, eyes unmoved. "We never dated," he told investigators. "She stayed at my place for a bit, but we were just friends. I helped her out when she needed somewhere to crash. That's all." He denied ever inviting her to Oregon. Denied being in a romantic relationship. Denied any argument. Denied knowing why she left. Detectives asked 73 questions. He gave full answers to only 40. To the rest, he offered vague responses like, "I don't recall," or simply stared forward in silence. When asked where he was on November 7th, he claimed he was running errands out of town. But surveillance footage said otherwise. CCTV from a corner store 2 blocks from his apartment showed Caleb, that very afternoon, purchasing a bottle of industrial-grade bleach, latex gloves, and heavy-duty trash bags. The timestamp? 4:42 p.m., November 7th, the exact time Linda's phone went offline. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Detectives also noted that Caleb had scrubbed his social media shortly after the missing persons report went public. He removed any photos containing Linda, deleted messages, changed his profile picture, deactivated several gaming accounts tied to their online relationship. When questioned about it, Caleb shrugged. "I didn't want people dragging me into drama." But this wasn't drama. It was a disappearance. And now, a potential homicide. The ocean never keeps its secrets forever. It takes, but sometimes it returns. 10 days after Linda Moreno vanished, the quiet shores of Cannon Beach, Oregon, stirred with an unease no one could quite explain. It was the morning of November 17, 2022. 2 local fishermen were combing the beach, not far from where the Columbia River meets the Pacific. They were searching for debris, the kind that sometimes washed up after storms. But what they found wasn't driftwood or anything natural. It was a leg, detached, pale, and half buried in damp sand. Cleanly severed. No shoe, no sock, no blood. Just a quiet horror sitting on the shore. They ran to the nearest ranger station. By the time Clatsop County authorities arrived, the tide had begun to rise again. But the beach was no longer just sand and seaweed. Multiple body parts, scattered, isolated, decomposed, were discovered within a 300-foot radius. There was no head, no fingerprints, No full torso. Only fragments. The forensic team would later describe it as professionally dismembered. The scene was quickly sealed off. It wasn't the work of nature, one investigator later said. It was calculated. Precise. Like someone who knew anatomy. Someone trained. In the days that followed, authorities worked backwards. They preserved what they could. Collected every fiber. Every scrap. But without a face or full set of prints, they had no way to identify the victim. Until they found the ring. A small, simple silver band, worn on the fourth finger. Weathered but intact. On the inside, an etched symbol, a stylized spiral with 3 tiny dots trailing outward. It meant nothing to police. But when Marissa was shown the photo, she broke down. That's hers. She never took it off. She called it her anchor. Got it when her mom died. She wore it every single day. But the ring wasn't the only confirmation. One of the recovered limbs had a small tattoo, faded but still visible, of that same spiral. Linda had gotten it on her 45th birthday. A symbol, she said, of starting again. Her way of declaring that pain didn't end her. It reshaped her. The remains were Linda's. DNA testing would later confirm it. By late November, the case was no longer a missing person investigation. It was a homicide. And the last person to see her alive, the man who denied even dating her, was now the center of a murder inquiry. But the question still haunted investigators. Why? They had no murder weapon. No confession. No witness. Only the fragments of a woman's body and a mounting web of lies. So they went back to Caleb Warren's apartment. And this time, they brought a warrant. The search was unannounced. Officers arrived just after sunrise, with gloves, masks, and forensics in tow. Caleb wasn't there. But what they found was enough to change everything. In the bathroom, traces of blood, dried, scrubbed, faint, but still visible under luminol. On the mattress, multiple bloodstains soaked into the fabric beneath the fitted sheet. On the floor, long dark hairs, some clumped together, others loose. In the closet, a half-packed suitcase, still tagged with Phoenix, Arizona stickers. Inside it, Linda's clothes. Her sandals. Her glasses. Her favorite sweater. It was like she never left, an officer said. Because she didn't. Further inside the apartment, behind a loose tile under the sink, detectives found something even more damning. A burner phone, turned off, wrapped in a plastic bag. When examined, it turned out to be a ZTE model, the exact type Linda had used as her secondary phone in Oregon. The last activity on the device? A Google search history. How to reset ZTE without password. How long does bleach destroy blood DNA? Best places to dump plastic bags, Oregon coast. There was no ambiguity anymore. Caleb Warren had lied. And suddenly, every detail, the bleach, the silence, the goodbye, screenshot, looked very different. Investigators tracked down a neighbor who lived in the unit below Caleb. She told them something she hadn't thought important before. On the evening of November 7th, she had seen Caleb struggling with multiple black trash bags, dragging them down the stairs around 9 p.m. He looked pale, sweaty, kept glancing over his shoulder. Another neighbor remembered a different detail. Caleb had stopped attending his university classes right around that same date. No word, no excuse, just vanished from campus. But perhaps the most disturbing lead came from a friend of Caleb's from the gaming community, someone who had once visited him in real life. This friend told police that Caleb had a fascination with human anatomy, particularly organ structure. He would post video clips of surgical dissections, some allegedly taken from obscure forums not indexed on public search engines. He was obsessed with clean cuts, the friend said. Said if you knew where to slice, you could get anything out without a mess. It wasn't proof, but it was context. Context that now included missing internal organs in Linda's body, cash deposits into Caleb's account around the same period, repeated travel between Oregon and Northern California, a corridor long suspected of harboring black market trafficking routes. Was Linda's death a crime of passion? Or was she targeted, lured, isolated, and used? Police didn't yet know. But they were no longer speculating. On December 3rd, a formal arrest warrant was issued for Caleb Warren, charging him with second-degree murder, unlawful disposal of human remains, and obstruction of justice. But when they went to pick him up, he was gone. When a predator runs, they don't go alone. They take silence with them. And sometimes, someone else. December 3, 2022. The arrest warrant for Caleb Warren was active, signed, and delivered to every department in Clatsop County and beyond. The charges: second-degree murder, unlawful disposal of human remains, and obstruction of justice in connection with the death of Linda Moreno. But Caleb Warren was no longer in Astoria. By the time officers arrived at his apartment, again, it was clear he had packed in haste. The bed was stripped, clothes gone, kitchen cabinets bare. And the burner phone? Left behind, powered off on the kitchen counter. A cruel joke, or a mistake? Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in over 24 hours. One recalled hearing a vehicle pull away sometime after 1 a.m. The sound of tires crunching gravel. A car door slamming. Then nothing. The manhunt began. Local police issued a BOLO alert across 3 counties. His vehicle, a gray 2006 Toyota Corolla, was entered into the national system. Border stations were notified. Airport authorities were put on standby. Detectives suspected he hadn't gone far. Not yet. But they were wrong. 2 days later, Caleb was spotted 260 miles south in a gas station parking lot outside Eureka, California. Surveillance footage showed him wearing a baseball cap, hoodie pulled low, fueling his car. What made the footage even more alarming was that he wasn't alone. A woman was in the passenger seat. Late 20s. Light brown hair in a loose ponytail. Wearing sunglasses and holding a fast food cup. She looked calm. Comfortable. She laughed at something he said before the video cut off. Investigators had no idea who she was. But she was now part of the case. On December 6th, police finally caught up with the vehicle, abandoned in a motel parking lot just outside Redding, California. It had been left neatly, locked, no sign of damage. Inside, they found discarded food wrappers, an Oregon University sweatshirt, and strands of blonde hair on the passenger seat. No Caleb. No woman. But hours later, a tip came in from the motel clerk. She remembered renting a room to Mr. Warren and a woman named Angela. Said they'd stayed only one night. Paid in cash. No luggage. They left before sunrise. By the following evening, U.S. Marshals received another tip, this time from a woman calling from a roadside diner near Sacramento. She claimed a woman matching the BOLO description had entered the bathroom around noon and never came back out. The woman had left something behind. A wallet. Inside, a California state ID. Name, Angela Reese, age 26. And a folded piece of notebook paper that read, "I didn't know what he did. I swear. Please don't show my face." Authorities traced the ID. Angela Reese had no criminal record. She was a nursing school dropout from Eugene, Oregon. Social media showed she had met Caleb through a gaming forum just weeks before Linda disappeared. Now she was gone, and Caleb was still on the run. But the pressure was building. Public outrage had reached a boiling point. News outlets ran side-by-side photos of Linda Moreno smiling in Arizona and the surveillance stills of Caleb at the gas station. Reddit threads exploded. Amateur sleuths tracked Caleb's past usernames, posts, medical forum activity, some of it disturbingly detailed. He once wrote, "The human body is efficient. Everything has value. Organs are assets, we just don't treat them that way." Meanwhile, forensic teams continued examining the items seized from Caleb's apartment. One discovery chilled even the most seasoned investigators. A digital folder, hidden within his gaming laptop under the name Admin Notes _Archive. Inside were dozens of screenshots, notes, timestamps, and a folder titled simply, The Contents? Photos of Linda, some she'd never sent to anyone. A document titled Exit Plan. A checklist with lines like, clean bathroom tile, reset phone, trash bags, heavy duty, stomach ice, 48H window. There was no more room for doubt. Caleb had not just killed Linda. He had planned it. And yet, Despite the evidence, the man himself remained in the wind. That is, until one phone lit up. On December 10th, Angela Reese walked into a police station in Medford, Oregon, shaking and pale. She told officers everything. She had met Caleb in a Discord server. He seemed intelligent, charismatic, broken in a romantic sort of way. Said his ex had abandoned him. Said he was rebuilding. Said he needed someone who understood pain. He told her he had enemies. That he needed to disappear. That she could come with him. He'd protect her. Start over together. And she believed him. Until they crossed into California. Until he started locking the car doors from his side. Until he told her not to use her phone. Not to make eye contact with strangers. Until he started muttering to himself about people watching and the girl who wouldn't let go. Angela panicked. At the diner, she said she'd go to the bathroom. She left her ID on purpose, praying someone would find it. Then she slipped out the back and ran 3 blocks until she found a bus station. Now she was safe. And Caleb? He was last seen 3 hours earlier, on foot, carrying a duffel bag and heading toward the Oregon wilderness. The forest hid him for 5 days. The courtroom wouldn't let him hide at all. December 15, 2022. A week after Angela Reese walked into the Medford police station and turned the entire case upside down, law enforcement finally caught up with Caleb Warren in a patch of dense woodland just outside Grants Pass, Oregon. He had been living in a makeshift shelter, a thin tarp stretched between 2 mossy trees, surrounded by cans of tuna, a half-empty first aid kit, and a backpack full of cash. Inside the backpack were $6,800 in small bills, a fake ID bearing the name David Hume, a prepaid burner phone, and most chilling of all, a worn paperback copy of Gray's Anatomy, with multiple highlighted passages related to abdominal dissection. When the tactical team approached, Caleb didn't resist. He stood still, pale and hollow-eyed, hands in the air. "You've got the wrong guy," he said softly. "I didn't kill anyone." But no one believed him anymore. Back in custody, Caleb Warren was placed in solitary confinement at Jackson County Jail. The media labeled him everything from the Oregon Ghost to the Phantom of Cannon Beach. The story dominated national headlines. Linda Moreno's photo, smiling, vibrant, flashed across every news segment in the country. Meanwhile, forensic teams continued to tie the news tighter. On December 18th, DNA analysis of the bloodstains on Caleb's mattress confirmed what most had already accepted. It was Linda's. More than that, trace blood was found under the bathroom tiles, on the inside of the kitchen sink, and even on the zipper of Caleb's duffel bag. The LM folder on his laptop contained over 40 individual files. Many were images, some taken without Linda's knowledge, captured while she was sleeping, showering, or sitting alone at the beach. Others were even darker, step-by-step notes on how to extract organs without causing outward trauma. He had recorded a plan. Not in one file, but across many. In one document labeled Psycholog 3, investigators found a checklist. Buy bleach white heavy checkmark. Rent freezer unit, if needed. Use gloves at all times white heavy checkmark. Check SIM swap options. Dump remains at beach equals risk, double check current, asterisk asterisk. The level of calculation stunned even seasoned detectives. "This wasn't spontaneous," said lead investigator Sandra Kim. "This was someone who studied, practiced, and waited. He saw her as a vessel, not a person." On January 5, 2023, the state of Oregon officially indicted Caleb Warren on charges of first-degree murder, unlawful desecration of human remains, obstruction of justice, illegal possession of controlled surgical equipment, conspiracy to commit organ trafficking. The last charge shocked the public, but investigators believed it was real. Caleb's bank records revealed a pattern of deposits, small, frequent, and always from third-party crypto exchanges. Combined with his travels to and from areas flagged by federal agencies for black market activity, the pieces were undeniable. "We may never know who bought those organs," said one federal prosecutor, "but we know who harvested them." The trial began in June 2023. It drew spectators from across the country. Inside the courtroom, Caleb looked like a shell of the man once captured in Discord selfies, gaunt, quiet, eyes dark and expressionless. He refused to speak to press. Refused to take the stand. His defense team argued that there was reasonable doubt. That Linda may have met someone else after leaving Caleb's apartment. That Caleb was a victim of obsessive behavior. That the screenshots and digital evidence could have been fabricated, planted, or misinterpreted. But the prosecution dismantled those claims piece by piece. They showed the jury Linda's blood under Caleb's fingernails. Search history for how to dissolve soft tissue. The voice memo Caleb had accidentally recorded, whispering to himself. Once it's out, there's no going back. Angela Reese testified on day 9 of the trial. She sat in front of a packed courtroom, voice shaking, hands clenched, and described how Caleb changed once they crossed into California. He talked about her like she wasn't real, Angela said. Like she was an experiment. He said he gave her everything, and that she still didn't understand what she was worth. The phrase, what she was worth, sent a visible shiver through the jury. Linda's family sat in the front row. Her sister, her brother, her niece Marissa, all dressed in black. Every time the prosecutor said her name, they squeezed each other's hands. The final blow came from a digital forensics expert. He proved, with timestamps, that the screenshot Caleb had sent to Marissa, the one that supposedly showed Linda's farewell, had been fabricated. The metadata showed it had been created using a local message simulator tool after Linda was already dead. Caleb never blinked as the verdict was read. Guilty. On all counts. On September 12, 2023, Caleb Warren was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without parole and ordered to pay $150,000 in restitution to Linda Moreno's family. He showed no emotion. No apology. He simply stared ahead, jaw locked, as though the courtroom wasn't real. Justice came. Not swiftly. Not quietly. But it came. And even though Linda's life was stolen, her story forced the world to look deeper at the dangers of trust and the monsters who wear human faces online. Coming up in Part 7, Closure, Legacy, and the haunting question, how many more Linda Morenos are still out there? It didn't end with a verdict. Not really. Because the weight of loss doesn't obey court calendars. It lingers, in empty chairs, in unread messages, in the silence where a voice used to be. After the trial, life didn't return to normal. Not for Marissa, not for Linda's sister Clara, and certainly not for anyone who had loved her. Justice had been served. A man had been sentenced. The cameras moved on. But grief doesn't follow the news cycle. In Mesa, Arizona, the living room where Linda once curled up with her cat was now quiet. Her plants, once thriving under her care, began to wilt. Clara tried to water them. She couldn't bring herself to throw them out. Marissa had kept Linda's favorite sweater, the one with the embroidered cactus patch. She didn't wash it. The faint scent of lavender detergent still lingered, like a memory refusing to let go. For months, Linda's phone remained on her bedside table. Turned off but untouched. As if someone might call. As if Linda might come home. It's not just about losing someone, Marissa said in a local interview. It's about knowing they were betrayed. That someone watched them fall in love just to hurt them. Across the country, Linda's story resonated. Talk shows discussed it. Podcasts dissected it. Reddit threads debated every theory, every overlooked clue, every missed warning sign. Her name trended with hashtags like #JusticeForLinda and #OnlineSafetyNow. And in the wake of that spotlight, something began to shift. Other women came forward. Quiet voices, long ignored. One from Nevada, who had nearly flown to meet a man she'd known online, until her brother intervened. Another from Illinois, who sent money to a man promising love and a fresh start in New Mexico. Their stories didn't make headlines. But they reached inboxes. They were heard. Legislators in Oregon quietly began drafting a bill nicknamed Linda's Law, proposing stronger vetting and safety protocols for short-term rental platforms and requiring digital trail preservation in cases involving interstate guests. It passed quietly in committee, but it passed. Even in death, Linda had sparked something. Something real. Back in prison, Caleb Warren remained silent. No appeals. No statements. His attorney told the media that Caleb had become spiritually withdrawn. He refused interviews. Refused visitors. He rarely left his cell, speaking only when necessary, and even then, only in brief, clipped phrases. A prison psychologist described him as emotionally sealed, calculating, but disturbingly calm. Angela Reese, the woman who escaped with her life, moved to a new city under a different name. With help from victim support groups, she enrolled back in school, this time for social work. She said she wanted to help women who felt powerless. "He made me feel invisible," she once wrote anonymously. "But what I saw in Linda's family made me believe again." They didn't let him erase her. And that's where the story changed. Because Linda Moreno, age 50, wasn't remembered for how she died. She was remembered for how she lived. She was remembered in candlelight vigils held in both Oregon and Arizona, where friends read her poetry and released lanterns into the night sky. She was remembered in the community garden where she used to volunteer, where a bench now bears her name and the inscription, "May we never stop believing in kindness, but learn to protect it too." She was remembered in the faces of women who came after her, women who paused before trusting a stranger, who talked to their families first, who trusted their instincts. And above all, she was remembered by Marissa, who stood on a small stage during a community awareness event months later and said, "My aunt didn't die because she was naive. She died because someone weaponized her hope." If you want to honor her, don't stop hoping. Just teach others how to stay safe while they do. The auditorium fell silent. Not out of sadness, but out of understanding. Because what happened to Linda could happen to anyone. In a world where connections are made in pixels and promises are typed before they're ever spoken, the need to pause, question, and protect has never been more urgent. Voiceover softens. Linda Moreno followed love. What she found was cruelty. But what she left behind was a warning, a legacy, and a voice that will never truly disappear.